episode 3. Don't worry. I'll let you know when that cortado's done. You can get
It's not even a cortado. That is pure espresso,
Oh,
baby.
pure espresso?
Espresso.
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 Espresso. Here, let's listen to the whole thing.
I might add, the Second Amendment from the day it was passed limited own them. And I might add, the Second Amendment from the day it was passed limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. Those who say the blood of patriots, you know, and all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there are never been, if you want to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F15's and maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is that there's always been the ability to rationally limit the type of weapon that can be owned and who can own it.
When was this?
This was a while ago. This is when he implemented his no tolerance policy for FFLs.
No tolerance for, that was the zero tolerance for, like, mistakes.
Yes. Where, like, if you mess up, like, on a simple clerical error,
yeah,
you can have your
nailing people
FFL
across.
stripped from you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, merchants of death.
Yeah, zero tolerance policy.
I remember Operation Fast and Furious Biden. Do you?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so the clip that you just saw, we have some thoughts and words on.
Yeah.
We chose this as episode 2 because this gets Jake feisty, and I really like getting Jake feisty and putting him on camera.
It gets me fired up because that clip, that thing that he said could be one of the worst things I have ever heard out of a fucking president's mouth.
Right.
It shouldn't be, I mean, it's dangerous. It compromises the integrity of our Constitution because that is completely fucking false. Right. So first, if we want to start on like initially on that initial response to what the Second Amendment was intended for in the first place, and he says it was intended to be regulated in the first place. I know what he's talking about. He's talking about the verbiage. Mm-hmm. He's talking about the well-regulated militia. That's what he's referring to. And
right.
He's assuming that regulated militia means regulated by the government. Regulated meaning regulations, meaning we need to get in there and regulate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not the fucking case.
Yeah, because the government has never had the ability or right to regulate the militia. They've only had the ability to call upon the militia.
They've had the ability to call upon the militia. And what we really need to do is like, intent is huge, and we have to take on, like, let's put ourselves back in that position. And we're going to have an episode on the history of the Second Amendment, obviously, but like, let's talk about it a little bit right now. Let's put ourselves in the position of the founding fathers that have just recently come off of a revolution,
right? Being
subject to the crown, right? So these guys, you put yourself in their mindset. Do you think for even a second that the founding fathers of this country, as they wrote the Constitution, would be thinking about the government regulating anything when the entire revolution was spent removing themselves from that? The whole point of what we did and the blood that was shed was to give ourselves the freedoms that we didn't have in the first place, was to establish a government that did not have overreach, that could not affect our ability to protect ourselves. And so everything that he said, yeah, sure, maybe if our government in this day and age wrote a constitution, then it would absolutely be the intention would be to regulate literally everything we can put our fucking hands on.
Well, I mean, that's literally what they're doing.
And that is exactly what they're doing right now. But fortunately, the Constitution protects us from a lot of that. But they're still in violation of it every fucking day.
Oh, absolutely.
And depending on the states, whatever state that we're looking at, it's like, what crime du jour did they commit by attempting to, remove us from our ability to protect ourselves, and not just from the government. And I get it. What he's doing when you move that clip a little bit further, and he starts talking about if you need the Second Amendment to protect yourselves from the government.
Or to take on the government.
Or to take on the government.
To take on the government, I think.
To take on the government. Then you're going to need F-15's and maybe some nuclear weapons, I believe were his exact words.
Yep.
You're absolutely right, Biden. Yeah, we are going to need some F-15s and some nuclear weapons.
Give them, please.
So if that's the case and you're admitting that and our Second Amendment is indeed intended to protect ourselves from enemies, foreign and domestic, then yeah, give them to us, period.
Yeah.
All right. Again, okay, I know I said you're absolutely right, Biden. Those words came out of my mouth, but I want to come back and say that is not fucking true at all. Right. I said that as a joke.
That's
right?
a jest.
Yeah, I said it in jest. That is not the fucking case.
Right.
Let's have a little look at Afghanistan, for example. Right? How effective were we for 20 years of trying to institute any change in that country? I could speak on this a bit because I was deployed there. I have no idea. I was just a fucking Humvee gunner. Now, I had no part in, other than training the ANA and the AMP on them being able to protect themselves. I did not change policy in Afghanistan. Right. I was not involved in any of that by any means.
The political movement.
I was not, but I could see the attitude of the people that were there. Most of those dudes didn't fucking want us there. Now, I can also say this. They have protected themselves using basic firearms and munitions for centuries. Period.
Yeah, you really can't.
They have
look at history.
Look at what happened in Russia. I believe it was the 80s, 90s.
When the Russians came
in. Afghanistan didn't have an air force. They had AK-47s, man.
Yep.
They had whatever. They also had whatever munitions that they got off the Russians that they were smoking as they were coming in, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure back in the 80s they were smoking the Russians with bolt actions, dude.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So having a population who is well armed.
Son of a bitch.
What happened?
Just a battery died.
A battery died. All right.
It's like it never happened.
It's like it never happened. Right on. The reason why what Biden is saying gets me fired up, and he's saying that we need F-15s and nuclear weapons to be able to fight ourselves against our government. There's a couple reasons that fires me up. One, it's taunting the American people. It's like,
it's like a threat.
It basically, if you want to come fuck with us, we're going to hit you with F-15s and nuclear weapons is basically the way I take that, right? Yeah. It's you can't stack up to the United States government. But I think what he's fundamentally forgetting here is that if the day were to come that the government became tyrannical and crossed the line, if they're not already there, is who are you going to have in those F-15s? You're going to have American pilots in those F-15s, American pilots who probably, I would only assume, appreciate and support the Constitution of the United States, of which the United States government has been in violation of for quite some time. So are you going to put those pilots in there to go kill American people? Probably not. I mean, you could try. The point that I'm getting at here is when we look back to Afghanistan and we see or any other country that has had an armed population that was able to defend themselves against enemy coming in, what are we noticing? We're noticing the Afghan population with some AK-47s, some light munitions that were able to defend themselves against countries, including ourselves, that have air forces, that have superior firepower. Why? Because of exactly that. Because it's the why of why we're in there in the first place.
Right.
They are there attempting to protect themselves, right? They are there with a bigger why than Russia had when they initially invaded. So let's use that example, right? We've got Russia invading the country. Russia got fucked up. I mean, they got
thrashed.
They got thrashed. There were all over Afghanistan, especially in the Kandahar province, there were these things called like Russian graveyards, right? Where I'm not talking about graveyards for the humans that were killed in action there. I'm talking about just aircraft and tanks, just a bunch of old Soviet munitions. Yeah. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
It was in there, man. Everything from rotary aircraft to fixed wing aircraft, all different types of tanks, all different types of weapon systems that were just kind of all piled up in these little areas throughout Afghanistan. I mean, these guys just got wrecked. Because it was the heart and the spirit that kept them from being taken over by the Russians. Having rifles and having munitions obviously got the job done, But you can't tell me for a fucking second that just because another country has superior firepower that they are going to beat the country that is defending themselves. And that comes into play with Americans. Any red-blooded Americans that is going to stand by the Constitution, that is going to defend their freedom, is going to do it whether or not it's an enemy, foreign or domestic, and whether or not you've got F-15s or whether or not you've got fucking nuclear weapons.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So for us to be able to own ARs is incredibly important. For us to be able to own, I mean, a lot of people may not agree with me. I think I should be able to have a fucking Apache.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I know it's going to sound kind of fucking crazy to some people out there, but if my government owns that equipment, I should be allowed to own that equipment too. That's the way I think.
I want to throw one caveat out there, especially to if there are any people who align themselves with more anti-gun stuff. I don't think anybody should have nukes, not even the government.
Right.
That shit burns the sun.
Okay.
Let's not fuck with that.
So that's a good point, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, because we talked about it. He said,
F-15's and
back in the
nuclear
F-15s and nuclear weapons, and I said, you're absolutely right, Biden. We should be allowed to. Yeah, no, we shouldn't.
No.
You shouldn't. Nobody should have
Nobody
that
should
shit.
have those.
Unfortunately,
Oppenheimer even said we shouldn't have those.
Yeah.
And he created them.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a dangerous fucking thing, and that's probably how the human race is going to end up exterminating itself one day. If we're really honest with ourselves, someone's going to hit that fucking nuclear button, then everybody's going to hit it, and we're all just going to fucking die.
Right. What did Einstein say? World War III will be fought with. I can't remember the first part of it, but World War III will be fought with advanced weaponry, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Ooh.
Yikes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Well-
Yeah, that's an interesting take. So, getting back to that, I mean, that is for the president to announce that in a fairly threatening manner that you're going to need this equipment to be able to take on the government, I think is horrendous. But the fact that he is so disconnected with the actual principle behind why we have the Second Amendment, because before he said that, the F-15 nuclear comment, he actually talked about what the founding fathers intended that to mean.
Right.
And that is just fucking asinine, because no human in their right mind would look at founding fathers coming off of a revolution from a government that was tyrannical
Right.
to only instate a new government that was tyrannical. It's I don't.
It's backwards. It's backwards
It's
logic.
so fucking backwards.
Well,
it's not. It's unbelievable.
I really like how he's like he explicitly said that you couldn't own cannons. Yes, you could.
Yeah, you could.
Well, you 100% could. You still can, I'm pretty
Where
sure.
do you think, when the war started, right? When that Revolutionary War started, it was because that whole the British are coming. They were coming to take the munitions away from the
Right.
from the population. Again, feel free to fact check me. I'm not like a historian. I could be definitely missing some components here, but from what I understand, the British were attempting to disarm the colonists.
Correct.
Right, and when they found out that was happening, that is kind of what initiated the entire revolution. At the time, what they were attempting to take from the colonists, take from the, essentially what would be the American people, were the muskets, were the rifles, right? Were the cannons,
Yeah.
were all of the things that we already had that we were able to use to protect ourselves against the British government.
Right.
Right. So for him to say we weren't allowed to own it, yeah, absolutely, we were allowed to own it. Now, I don't know the details, and I should probably look this up, but I don't know the details of shortly after, the Second Amendment was written and then ratified in 1791, if there was some regulation that immediately went into place about not owning cannons. So I don't want to speak to that.
On that, yeah.
Because they may have came out and started putting these, regulations in place about, well, you can own this, but you can't own that. I have no idea how it worked after that, but I definitely want to dig into that, and that's, for another
That'd
podcast.
be good for the history of the Second Amendment there.
100%,
I mean,
yeah.
even just to toss in on that little portion there, people, there were still privateers. People had private armies back then still.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
right.
like, to say that it was always regulated and it was always to put a hold on what people can have is ridiculous. And
Yeah.
I wanna insert this in there for
Well, the regulated, we should also note that a well-regulated militia the intent of that was a well-organized militia, right? And that was the meaning of that. back then.
Correct.
It didn't mean regulated by the government. It meant a well-organized, like a well-put-together
Correct.
militia.
Yes.
Right? And so, obviously, you know, there were two schools of thought back then, so far as I know, if I can recall. Again, feel free to fact check me. But there were the Federalists who believed in a strong centralized government, right? And then the drawing a blank, the non-Federalists who believed in a strong state government, right? So individual kind of state governments and not a strong centralized government. So the intent was, regardless of which entity got its way, which I believe it ended up being the Federalists who ultimately got their way, but the militias, of which were to protect our individual freedoms, which were clearly explained in our Constitution, were clearly explained in our Bill of Rights. For us to be able to protect those things, we had to be well organized. We had to be well trained, right? And that all goes into that word regulated.
Right.
Regulated means they should know what they're doing, right? They should, they should not only exist, but be well trained and know what they're doing and be able to defend themselves against enemies, foreign and domestic. So I don't want to get too much in the weeds there, especially because I don't have a lot of the information in front of me. But I do know that if we are going to remain intact as a nation and be able to protect our families for generations to come, we have to have the ability to protect ourselves, because all it's going to take, what happens if we go back into the history of any other nation that is had a tyrannical government that is impeded on the individual rights and freedoms of a population, the first thing they do is disarm that population.
Correct.
It is a historical fact that you look into every single iteration of government overreach and then a revolution, and it's generally disarmament of the citizens.
Well, I mean, just to throw in there, just for, thought process or thought purposes, is a government that is afraid of its citizens will always try and disarm them. Why would a government be afraid of its citizens unless it's doing something wrong?
That's right.
And then I wanted to put this in here because I got some old quote unquote definitions of militia to put in there for the viewers. Here's from Webster's, which is like an 1823, I think, Webster's dictionary.
All right.
The militia of a country are the able-bodied men organized into companies, regiments, and brigades with officers of all grades and required by law to attend military exercises on certain days only, but at other times left to pursue their usual occupations.
Right.
And then James Madison in 1788, one of our founding fathers, a militia amounting to near 500,000 of citizens with arms in their hands, officered by men chosen from among themselves, fighting for their common liberties, and united and conducted by governments possessing their affections and confidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, it's pretty clear that what the intention was behind the Second Amendment, right? And so, yeah, I get it. We all feel very safe right now, right? It's everything's, we're well protected by our federal government. We're well protected, by the United States Army and the Marines and the Air Force. And, it feels good and it feels comfy.
Right.
So, what's the point of a gun then, right? What's the point of the Second Amendment? Well, the point of the Second Amendment is in case any of that shit gets out of hand and they can't protect us, or they are the actual enemy one day, then we should be able to defend ourselves.
Correct. You should never put your protection in somebody else's hands.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately, just as human beings in general, it is, there is an unalienable right for us to be able to protect ourselves and defend ourselves. So, going back to the bullshit that he spouted in that little speech that he gave on his zero tolerance policy back in 2021, I definitely want to reiterate that, you can think that we need F15's and nuclear weapons to fight the government, but we don't. All we need is a good fucking reason why, and we will win a war regardless if we have the fucking firepower. There's going to be some serious casualties, but give me some American pilots who are even willing to go to war against the American people. And those pilots, like you and I were talking about the other day, you said, it's a very good point. Those pilots have families. They've got friends all over the United States. What are you gonna do? You gonna send those guys out in some aircraft and just like light up neighborhoods?
Yeah, you're gonna send a pilot from Kansas to go bomb Kansas? I don't
Absolutely
think so.
fucking not, man.
Yeah.
Like who do you think you're gonna get to, participate in that type of an action? And again, we're not there.
No.
But if you're gonna threaten the American people, at least have something to back it up other than your,
Trying to flex
trying
superior
to
firepower.
Yeah.
And
It's not gonna happen because you don't need superior firepower to
Win a war.
to win a war. You absolutely don't.
Vietnam, Afghanistan.
Nope.
Yep.
Vietnam, none of that. It just doesn't work. I mean, you got to have, if you've got heart and you got a good enough reason why, which I think we all do.
Yeah.
There's nothing you could bring to that fight that is going to, you cannot kill an idea.
Batman.
Period. You cannot kill an
Yep.
idea. You cannot kill the ideology of the Constitution, which
Right.
is for us to be able to celebrate our own freedom, for us to be able to protect our own unalienable rights to freedom.
Right. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
100%. So anyway,
I wanna put this out here for people who, I really hope that more anti-gun people actually listen to this, because I would love for them to put their opinions down below, and have civil discourse, right? So I want to put this out here for those people, as well as maybe some of you guys who are part of the Second Amendment listening and maybe don't agree that the government might be quote unquote tyrannical, right? So I want to read this off, the definition of tyranny real quick.
okay.
It's a noun, and it is cruel and oppressive government or rule. A nation under cruel and oppressive government, or cruel, unreasonable, or arbitrary use of power or control. So I want you guys to think about that when somebody says, specifically the president says, if you want to stand up against the government, you're going to need much more than your guns, because we've got F15's and nukes.
Right.
Like think about it back on a level of like, if those of you who have siblings or had a bully growing up,
Right.
the bully or the sibling goes, you can't take me on. I'm older than you. I'm
Twice
bigger
your
than you."
size. Yeah.
Yeah. You're gonna need to be way bigger.
Right.
Yeah. Just thought processes like that. And then also
Threatening sentiment for sure.
yeah, also like going back to the heart argument that you were talking about. Think about it just from a perspective of an invading nation coming into America. Right? Let's just say somebody's coming in. Even if you're, against firearms, against the Second Amendment, are you gonna roll over? Are you gonna just let an invading nation come in, kill your family, potentially put you in an internment camp? Who knows?
Something going on right now with that exact thing, and it's that Russian invasion into Ukraine.
Right.
So, I mean, we see it firsthand. It's happening right
Right.
now. Are they able to defend themselves? Yeah, I mean, partly because we're that's another topic.
That's another topic. For
But
another day.
yeah, I mean, they are, they locked military age males from leaving the country, and they said you're going to sit here and defend this ground.
Right.
I would hope that we had enough heart to be able to do the same.
that,
I would
yeah.
hope we wouldn't have to close our borders from our men leaving the country.
Right.
I mean, I would maybe in a perfect world, and maybe it is a little ambitious of me to think that most Americans would want to stay here and protect what we've got.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to, I believe, and like you said, fact check me, the Japanese general in World War II. He said, "I dare not invade the U.S. because there would be a rifle behind every blade of grass."
That's right.
Yeah. So
That's
it's
right.
like,
And everybody knows that.
right.
Yeah, everybody knows that. There's World War II, right? Right before that, Germany was making their way around, taking everybody out. They neatly went right around Switzerland.
Yeah,
I believe
it's weird.
it was.
They just kind of like diverted like a hill of ants.
Because every household in Switzerland had a rifle. In fact, it's been policy in Switzerland for a very long time that there's mandatory military service, and when you get out of the military in Switzerland, I believe you take your rifle home with you, and it is actually required for you
I think
to
now-
own a rifle.
I
At
think
least
now
it
it's
was.
a choice if you want to.
Gotcha.
But either way, I believe you're still correct.
I
on
think
that.
back then you had to own a rifle.
Yeah.
Like it was a requirement. You got out of the military, you took a rifle with you, you brought it home, everybody had one. They're not gonna fuck with that.
No.
How are you gonna fuck with that?
You can't. And obviously he didn't.
And obviously he didn't.
Right.
He made his way to other nations that were, low-hanging fruit. So he didn't come over here. I don't know if he ever would have came over here.
That would have been a bold move.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the Japanese,
Right.
they technically didn't. They hit Pearl Harbor because they were just trying to hold, the Pacific.
Right.
They weren't trying to take on America. They were
Right.
trying to hold port.
But they chose poorly.
They chose bad.
Anyway, so that's what I have to say about that. I think every time I watch that clip, because it always gets popped up and talked about on social media, the internet in general. There's a lot of reference to it in the Second Amendment community. It just fires me up, man. It's
the blood boiling.
It gets my blood boiling because there's a lot of things that a president can talk about, and that a president can have their opinions on, regardless of what party they're in. But telling and threatening the American people with your own military is just next level shit, dude.
Yeah,
and
that's a bold move.
It is a bold move, and it fires me up every time. And I would be sitting here having this conversation. I don't give a fuck who said it, man. It could be a Republican president.
Right.
It could be my favorite president in the world. It could be a guy that I don't look. It could be somebody. It could be somebody that I voted for. It could be somebody that I completely respected in my party. And if that individual said what Biden said, I'd be having the same fucking conversation. It would not matter who it was.
Right.
It could be anybody, and I would have a problem with somebody that was in a position of leadership for this country to say anything like that.
Right.
Because it is not only a bad look on in our own nation, but that's a shitty look on the world stage too.
Yeah.
Right. Other countries seeing
To threaten your own populace,
country,
essentially.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't matter who would have said that, man. It could have been, anybody. Could have been somebody in my party. I'd be having this conversation with you right now. Yeah, that's that, man. That's all I got to say about that. I mean, we can wrap that up. This is a pretty quick one.
Just get a little spicy take.
Get a little spicy take on our opinion on it. So if you guys are listening right now, just let us know what you think about that. If there's any other ridiculous shit that you wanted us to comment on, and if you want to leave some links to some other videos, I'd be happy to watch those and give my take on them as well. And what's your take on it? Let us know. We'll read everything and respond in kind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
share with all your friends. Let us know what you like, what you don't like.
Yep.
Leave comments down below. Share it with people.
If this was a terrible episode, you never want to hear anything like it again, then we'd be happy to pivot and move somewhere else. I don't, it's all good. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm going to immediately start talking about something else because you guys don't want me to, but I'll certainly, I'm not sitting here talking so that I can later watch it myself. Right. We're here for an audience. So if you guys want to hear something else, let us know, and I'll move some things around.
I kind of like the approach of that one company. I can't remember the name of them, but they don't care.
What?
You give them feedback and they really let you know that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's leaving me, but
I can't.
Either
leaves
way.
me too.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. That you're trying to provide them with some feedback to help them better.
Constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism.
And then they just tell you that you don't know anything.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that is that. Leave some comments. We will respond to them, and we will see you on the next episode.
Episode 3. Adios.